Okay, wow. What happened there? Well, it's working. Let's try it again. Okay, there's some good clouds of smoke there. We got white smoke, folks. Habemus Papam, Gaudium Magnum. Grant glorious tidings. We have a Holy Father. We have a Pope. All right. Holy Smoking Pipe Padre. The sui generis one. Coming back at you. Smoking some Hell of the Wind. Some Rattray's Hell of the Wind. Yeah, there we go. And I think it's a Rivera, Philip Rivera. Cherrywood, one of my favorite pipes. Okay. Greetings and salutations, pipe pals and gals. Okay, Holy Smoking Pipe Padre, yep. Coming back at you with some alternative coffee. Alternative coffee, you know. The old gentleman scholar likes alternative music, so this is alternative coffee. I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, good. Got a good draw. Might be a little tight, but that's okay. Okay, so it's Thursday evening. It's 1 week. 1 week to the day that we just had a brand new Holy Padre, Holy Pope, Holy Pope, man. Holy Pope. Anyway, so it's been 1 week today that Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, whatever, American Cardinal, unbelievable. From Chicago. Can anything good come from Chicago? That's what except deep dish pizza. Oh yeah, and the White Sox. Oh, I'm gonna get it from some of you. I know. I hear it. I'm can hear the clicker and clatter of all those little keys going off and telling me how hateful and intolerant I am. All right. So, hope you're doing well. Ooh. So as I look out the window here, don't see any bears, but they're out there. Yep, they tore up a house the other day. Well, they tore up their trash. Somebody didn't put it away correctly. So they were out there having a feast, a bear picnic. Anyway, so, yeah, let me get a little sip of coffee here. Well, this is a coffee alternative. Now, what do I mean by coffee alternative? I'll take a little picture here and a little video. My new coffee alternative called Ticino. I think that's how you pronounce it, Ticino. And it's actually an herbal chicory kind of a concoction. No caffeine, no coffee. And, you know, as some of you watch my videos over the years, you know that I, every Lent, what I do is I go off of coffee. I give up coffee. Because it is a real, it's a real hard thing to do. And I've done it now about 8 or 9 years. And, but this last time I went through horrendous headaches. I kind of swore, I said, you know, I was up in my little prayer loft in the church during like the first week of Lent. And the reality is, although I am old and I'm slowing down a bit, I'm overly stimulated in many ways. I don't need caffeine anymore. And when I give it up, oh man, it hurts so bad. And I started thinking, there may become a time when I have an emergency, may have to go into the hospital. And if I'm having to struggle with whatever that is, God forbid, whatever it is, having caffeine withdrawal headaches on top of all that would be horrendous. And so I started thinking, maybe it's best that I leave the caffeine behind now and just, and I felt really good during the last 3 weeks of Lent. But the first several weeks of Lent, I was still in a lot of pain. I started my tapering down thing. I started way too late, and I tried to rush it. Oh, man. And normally, when I do it correctly, I kind of like start 20 days before Ash Wednesday. So Ash Wednesday, I normally wake up clear-headed. I feel great. No pain. No, everything's good. And I can function. I'm focused. It's all good. Not this year. It was miserable. It was miserable. And it stayed like that for almost 2 weeks. I finally got off of the caffeine, and then I made the mistake on Easter Sunday. I normally go down to a dear friend's house, have my very first cup of not decaf, but real coffee. And, and I love it. And, but this year there were other things that kind of mitigated me from going down and celebrating. Unfortunately, I had other commitments here. Anyway, long story short, I thought, well, I'll brew up some decaf and that should be fine. I'll be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. 2 days later, the raging headaches came back and I'm like going, what the heck's going on? Well, again, and most of you already know this, there's a good amount of caffeine even in decaf coffee. It's really kind of a misnomer when you think about it. And so I basically re-injured myself, I guess. And so I spent like a week suffering again because I was trying to just drink decaf, and that was just triggering. It was like at the threshold where it sent off those caffeine craving dependency issues. And oh man, it hurt. So anyway, I started thinking about it. I started looking on the internet, and I said, well, there's been a couple of people I've stumbled upon over the years that have talked about actually how you really get off of caffeine, not just coffee, premium coffee, but, caffeine all around. And you don't use decaf. Now, I've done that for several years now, and I've always noticed that I would always still have the really bad headaches. Maybe not as bad as going cold turkey, certainly, but still had them. Now, I had a little one last night because I'm what I call cross the Rubicon. So instead of doing, I cut it down about every other day by 1 teaspoon. And the other part of it was I didn't respect the ratio last time. That was part of it too. Started way too late. Tried to rush it. And I was very sloppy in my preparations. And anyway. So this time there's a coffee called Ticino, and it's no caffeine, none whatsoever. It's like a probiotic, no acid, and so it's actually supposed to be pretty healthy for you. So anyway, I have been last week and a half started very slowly, tapering down very gradually. So we'll see how I feel tonight before I go to bed. But I'm at 7 and 3. So 7 alternative coffee, so 3 teaspoons of regular. And maybe tomorrow or maybe Saturday, they take that down to 2. And hopefully by maybe early next week, I'll be completely weaned off of the caffeine this time for good. So yeah, I don't need to be stimulated. I'm overly stimulated in lots of things. It's like I don't know. I'm just a very hyper person to begin with, and I noticed that I was starting to feel kind of this new level of just kind of instead of like this, I'm kind of like this. It was more like kind of like that. It was really, there was more of a calm, steady, and I really liked that. So then there were some other things that were contributing to that too. So I was kind of experimenting with other things that just don't jack me up. They don't mess me up, and So anyway, I was kind of like, I kind of like this new feeling where I'm not feeling all anxious and amped up all the time. I mean, there was a time when I loved my coffee, and I still do, and I can still enjoy this Ticino in the morning. To me, it's very similar. I mean, it doesn't taste bad. In fact, it's really flavorful. They make it out of this herb. There's all sorts of little herbal things in there that are really nice and pleasant, but they just don't jack you up. And so anyway, I just thought, well, I want to get off the caffeine and stay off of it, and no more tricking myself with even decaf, because I thought, well, as long as it's decaf, I'll be fine. And no. It's kind of funny because I know a lot of people that do drink decaf, and I guess they're able to tolerate it because they say, well, I can't drink regular coffee. I'm going, well, you know what? I can't even drink decaf. Oh, man. So anyway. So yes, we have a new Holy Father in Pope Leo the 14th. And I want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about it kind of a little more candidly than I do in my homilies. Because this is more of my personal reflections. Now, I'm not disingenuous on my homily channel. I just don't get down maybe to the level, the raw, honest, the way I feel about certain things. And I want to probably do that. I was reading the gospel today, for this coming Sunday, and the first line it says, and when Judas finally left the assembly of the apostles, or he left, see, I'll have to find that. I wish I had sometimes I wish, sometimes technology deceives you. You think it's like super at your fingertips, but anyway, this gospel is from John, and anyway, but it does have that first line, and when Judas left their assembly, or something along those lines. And so if you heard me say that, and you saw the little my little let's see if I can do this here, there. So I put a little animation there, and again, it's that's the way I feel about certain people leaving. And I want to talk a little bit more about that kind of candidly. We recognize that, the apostles, to include Judas, he was one of the apostles, but he wasn't a good apostle. And certainly the church has had over the centuries bad popes. We believe that, as Catholics, we believe that the Pope is the successor of St. Peter. And so last Thursday, wow. It was, and I'm still, to some extent, you could knock me over with a wet mop on last Thursday morning, because I just finished saying Mass, and the conclave was going on, and we just kind of assumed that it was like the second day. It was the second day. They got there on Wednesday. I think they had a vote on Wednesday evening, and then I guess Thursday Italian time they had a vote in the morning, and then they had a vote in the afternoon, or maybe it was they had a vote Wednesday morning and then Wednesday afternoon, and then they had another two on Thursday. Anyway, all I know is that last Thursday, right after Mass, about 9 o'clock, 9:30, maybe 9:20, I get a message, there's white smoke, there's white smoke. Who knew, white smoke, my goodness, what's going on with that? And so anyway, so there was white smoke. There we go, white smoke. And so the anticipation started to grow. I'm kind of waiting and waiting. This is like the third conclave that I've watched kind of on TV as a Catholic. Now, when I became a Catholic, I'm a convert. I used to be a Southern Baptist. Maybe some of you don't know that, but I used to be a Southern Baptist. I was baptized in the Southern Baptist Church. And I come by it honestly. And my folks and my lineage is from, we're Okies from Muskogee. I found out that I guess Oklahoma isn't that far from places like Louisiana, at least where my parents were born, or my mom was born. And so about 100 miles as the crow flies, or maybe, or 75 miles, you cross into, there's Texas, of course, and then there's Louisiana. And so I don't know, but I've always had an affinity for people from the South, but anyway, so I don't know where I was going with all that. I was going to talk about Southern Baptist. I was Southern Baptist. That's right. So, but I wasn't a Southern Baptist in Oklahoma or Louisiana or Texas. I was Southern Baptist in good old California, and but anyway, so so I couldn't believe that we had an American Pope. I've always, again, when I came in as a Catholic, and back in '86 was when I converted, and I was baptized. I wasn't baptized because I was already baptized, Trinitarian formula, so I had a valid baptism, but I received confirmation and first of all the Eucharist. And I'll never forget, it was a powerful experience. I mean, it kind of transcends just emotions. I mean, I've been to a lot of, been to a lot of, Baptist revivals and summer camps and, things like that. And, sometimes it can be very moving emotionally. And, you make the altar call and you accept Jesus as Lord and Savior and praise God, So, when I became a Catholic, Pope John Paul II was already Pope and had been Pope for a number of years, at least almost 10 years. So, But I remember going to Candlestick Park. He came to America I think I just went to the seminary. I got there in late August, and by early September, he was coming to Candlestick Park and doing his tour of America. And I mean, it was like, real halcyon kind of thing, days, it was like, you look back on it and you go, I can't believe I was part of all that, in a small, insignificant way, of course, but still, it was electric. It really was. So when he passed and he died, in 2005, and then I watched the first real conclave. I was watching the conclave, the election of the Pope. Pope Benedict, of course, finally came out on the loggia, and we were beside ourselves. We couldn't believe that they elected Cardinal Ratzinger as now Pope Benedict XVI. It's like, wow. And Pope Benedict, I think, did a great job. Now, I know that we'll talk a little bit about this, the progressives or people that want radical change, they certainly weren't happy to see Pope Benedict on the loggia, but I was beside myself. I couldn't believe it. My friend and I were like, wow, this was incredible. It was one of those moments in a person's personal life, as well as in the life of the church, that is indelibly marked. You just can't forget something like that. So God bless Pope Benedict of recent memory. And then, of course, the problem was that the other thing that happened, which was out of the norm. Here's a man who retires as Pope. It hadn't been done in like 600 years. And it was just it was just fraught from the very beginning, it was just an awkward, the whole thing was awkward for him to resign. There was speculation, controversy all around that thing till the day he died, even until the day Francis died. So, and so what I wanted to say, because again, I might be a little more candid in this, not that I don't think I'll be harsh, but I'm going to be honest. The first couple of years, I tried to give Pope Francis the benefit of the doubt, but I have to be honest and tell you that my first impressions when he walked out on the loggia, my heart sank. I could just tell deep down inside that this guy was not going to be a good pope, at least for a lot of people that believe the way I do. And it turned out, I hate to say, there were a couple of years I tried to kind of like give him the benefit of the doubt. He would say these off the cuff things, and then the media would expand upon them and inflate them, and then take them and run with it in a completely, progressive, ideology, agenda, and it just went from bad to worse. And eventually he kind of declared war on traditional Catholics. Now I consider myself an Orthodox Catholic who loves tradition. There's some I used to say I was a traditionalist, and I would probably still I still feel that way. There are a lot of people who would say, oh yeah, you're a traditionalist, and you like the Latin Mass and you do all this, but I'm not a traditionalist that's to the point of being schismatic, where you denounce Vatican II and even Pope Benedict and Pope John Paul II, and because there are a lot of traditionalists more radical than I am, I guess, or more to the right of than I am, and yeah, they clearly have real strong feelings that Vatican II was a break with the church, and I don't deny that there were a lot of problems with Vatican II, and the thing that I felt with Pope Francis was that he, although I know some people don't want to hear this, but he was the Pope, but he wasn't a good Pope. He had a lot of problems, and now I just am seeing, now again, a lot of this stuff you got to take with a grain of salt, because I just saw something that clearly, and at least they were honest enough to say this is AI generated. It was an AI generated now of Pope Leo XIV supposedly saying all these things. Poor hand is starting to kind of curl up again. I don't like that. I want to keep it straight. I sleep with a little splint every night, and it kind of keeps it straight, but there's a lot of stiffness in there still. It probably will be for the rest of my life. I don't know. But anyway, and it's very upsetting because they're now generating, I guess this is all voice, AI generated voice that sounds just like him. And I'm going, wait a minute, because I've been following everything that he says. Yesterday he had a meeting with the Eastern Catholic churches. They're starting their Jubilee year, or they're in their Jubilee year. And I heard us talk to the media. That was positive. His opening mass, his first sermon, first homily, at his very first papal mass in the Sistine Chapel, and I wrote it down, and I'm probably going to hold on to that forever and say, hey, look, you said this in the beginning, and now you're deviating from it. What's going on here? I hope he doesn't. I hope, he's just like, say, when he came out on the loggia, when they announced the name, Cardinale Roberto Franciscus, Prevost, I'm like going, what? Who? What? Now, I was afraid it was going to be Cardinal Parolin, one of the Vatican high mucky mucks. I guess he was the Secretary of State, kind of a insider kind of a guy. I guess he was the Secretary of State for the Vatican. And then there were a couple of other candidates that were being very. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I just don't know why I get so. It's almost 8:30, so I'm not totally tired. I shouldn't be tired. I'm feeling pretty good actually. But there were some real scary candidates, and I was really afraid that it wouldn't have been Robert Francis Prevost, but Robert McElroy. Oh my gosh. Now you have to understand, as a Catholic priest and priests and bishops, we've been told, at least here in America, there is never, ever going to be an American Pope. Never. Forget that. That they're not in the running. Okay? No, never. And to have this guy come out, there he is, an American cardinal, now an American Pope. Wow. But the things that I've been seeing have really, and again, I hope it's not an okey doke, like they're kind of like, you're looking for that right, and then all of a sudden, boom, they give you the uppercut, boom, and you're not prepared for it. And I hate to say I think that way, and I'm not alone. I mean, don't get me wrong. Everything that I've heard him say thus far, officially, really, not AI generated. They have these AI ones that are now making him say all these flowery things, and you're going, wait a minute, I never heard him say that. It's all just generic. It's almost like John Lennon stuff. Imagine there's no heaven. Imagine those no religion, no, all that crap. That peacenik crap. All that communist socialist crap, all that woke crap. But anyway, but everything that I've heard him say has been very, very encouraging. And again, he comes out dressed in the papal regalia. That says something, because Francis was a break with tradition, and he clearly wanted to be the Pope that. And in fact, Francis himself said these two things. He said he wanted to make a mess. He told young people to go out and make a mess, and he made a mess, let me tell you. And he said, I don't want a new church, I want a different church. He was very clear about that. And I remember going on a couple of walks and listening to some of his talks, and I'm like going, who is this man? Where did he come from? Because he is not he's not a successor of St. Peter. He's doing something on his own. He's making it all up as he goes along. He's flushing tradition. He's flushing the teaching magisterium of the church, and he's writing his own magisterium. He's writing his own book, and he's trying to say that we have the magisterium of Francis, and by golly, you're going to follow that. Well, excuse me, Papa Francesco, but no. No, a pope is not the author of the sacred magisterium. He's only the custodian. That's it. You have to faithfully hand on what we received from St. Peter, the apostolic succession, the apostolic, foundations of the faith. You can't make it up. You can't flush what you don't like and say, oh, I don't like this and I don't like that. And that's kind of what he did. The very first moment he came out, well, I'm not going to wear that papal stuff. I'm just going to wear the white cassock and that's it. I'm not going to, quote unquote, I'm not going to live in the papal apartments. We found out that the Santa Martha place is like a 5-star hotel. Talk about humility and poverty, right? No, the papal apartments have been there for centuries, and they're not like a Playboy penthouse. Okay, guys, come on. They're very humbly appointed. They're just big rooms, probably because you're going to be having, going to have a few of your closest cardinal friends over for maybe sandwiches and tea or something. So you got to have space to do that. You greet a lot of people in the Vatican, Anyway, so the I want to say the quasi humility of the former pontiff was, come on, Now I was going to say about this other issue. Again, I don't know if it's AI generated. I don't know if it's just fake news. I don't know, but apparently there's some good sources, solid, credible sources that are now reporting. And I've kind of thought about this a little bit, and not quite the same, not exactly 100%, but I was in the ballpark on this one. I said, I kind of get the impression that somehow Pope Francis is being managed like Joe Biden, because we all know now, whether you want to believe it or not, that Joe Biden had cognitive decline. He wasn't all there, and he was being managed. And it became painfully obvious in the last few weeks of his presidency. I mean, to me, it was painfully obvious 4 years ago. I thought, this guy's never going to be able to be president. First of all, they called him creepy Uncle Joe because of all of his little, pedo, chomo kind of things with the kids, those little girls, he was like, don't touch the little girls, okay? Don't mess with them, okay? Oh, I thought for sure that there were so many videos of him being creepy, just super creepy with little girls. And it was just like, no, this is bad. This is bad. But we knew that he was in cognitive decline, and that's now, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's reality. And apparently the Pope was on SSRI drugs for depression, I guess they said, because he had these mood swings. I mean, there's some bizarre videos of that guy. People are coming up to reverence him and show him the respect of his office. And as people tried to, give him the traditional, they would kiss his ring, he would pull it back. And then there's a couple times where he would kind of pull back and smile, like, I ain't gonna let you guys kiss my hand. I don't do all that old traditional stuff. It was just the most bizarre thing in the world. And then he came out about several years ago saying that he wasn't the vicar of Christ. He rejected the vicar of Christ title. Well, then whose vicar are you? He used to carry a witch's stain instead of a shepherd's crozier. He carried a witch's stain, like a sorcerer or a warlock or a witch. That was creepy. What the heck is that? It was like, who is this guy? I mean, all the signs that he was saying, he's like, hey, he's not really. Anyway, but this Pope comes out and he's dressed in the papal regalia. He greets everybody, but he does it not off the cuff, but very staid and very calm, very, very succinct. Gives the traditional blessing in Latin, not just a traditional Latin, not just a Latin blessing, but the one that goes all the way back to Pius XII, the actual traditional one. Next morning in the Sistine Chapel, gives a beautiful homily, beautiful teaching, and then says Mass in Latin. Now, he didn't say the traditional Tridentine Latin Mass, but he said the Novus Ordo Mass in Latin. And in fact, that Mass still can be celebrated by any priest without any special reservations or permissions. It's Vatican II. It's the Mass of Vatican II. So, you don't have to, get permission. You can't, somebody may not like it. There are a lot of progressive liberals or, woke people that, why? Because they know that the Latin it cements ourselves in our tradition. And tradition doesn't change. And see, people want change. Some people want radical change. And Francis was a change agent. And that's what he was probably put in there to do. Again, we'll never know all the machinations that go on in those conclaves. But he was sent in there to try to break things up. And he did a pretty good job. So we're hopeful that the new Pope is going to be able to clean up the mess, put the church back on the right track, and it'll be maybe it'll be a little disappointment. Now again, I might be here another month or two and saying, well, I was wrong. This guy is Francis too. So all the things that Francis was pushing for will, under this guy, if he is a Francis too, then all these things will become reality. But I don't see how he can do that. Again, because I think he knows, again, because everything he's been saying is he's talking about going back to apostolic tradition. And he's signaling certain things that seem to be saying, hey guys, new sheriff in town, we're gonna clean up the mess. Now, and I hope he does. But it's going to take great courage, because, we have so many angry people now that are demanding the church ordain the women and give gay marriage, and let divorced and remarried people go to communion without benefit of a church annulment, embracing transsexual ideology, all these hot button issues that Francis was trying to open the door on and shove through. Pope Leo is going to have to very lovingly say, I'm sorry, folks, that's not what the Catholic Church teaches. And he's going to have a tremendous amount of courage to do that. Because right now, now I know some people are saying, oh, he's Francis too. And then there are other people on the other side saying, oh, guys, this guy's horrible. He's the worst guy we could have, Again, time will tell. We just don't know where he's going to go. But if you listen to his words, the authentic words, not these AI generated things, that's just so creepy. It's like, wow, you could make him say anything. You could have him saying, oh yeah, and I mean, it's not good. It's not good. But yeah, so the thing is that the last 12 years have been really, it's been hard for a lot of us. So many good Catholic families were hurt by him. He said so many uncharitable things. I'll just leave it at that. And the only thing that I could kind of pull out of my own personal life that kind of made it tolerable was I had a horrible father. My father left us when I was 4 and I never saw him again. Found out he died 10 years later when I was 14, and but Pope Francis was a lot like kind of like a bad father, a bad dad. He was abusive. He didn't come over here and physically slap me around, but theologically he sure did. Ridiculed, my Catholic faith, told me that he didn't like people that were trying to restore, like the church, whether it was theologically or in my case, fixing up this little old church here. I'm sure he probably would have been very disappointed, very upset with me. How dare you, fix that old church up? You need to tear it down and build something new and modern. I'm sure he probably would have not been very happy with me. He would have said, well, why'd you put that guy up there? That guy's, all he's doing is trying to turn everything back around to the way it used to be, 100 years ago. Yeah, well, that's kind of true. We're trying to preserve the past for the future, but we're enjoying it in the present, We had to fix a lot of things, and instead of, throwing out the old things, we fixed the old things. We restored them to their former beauty, and we've tried to make them even more beautiful. And started kind of with, we had an old 100-year-old set of plaster of Paris Stations of the Cross, and they were all plaster Paris white, and then somebody got the bright idea to take some house paint and paint them with house paint, probably 60 years ago, maybe 70 years ago, I don't know. And they were peeling, and they were chipped, and they were broken, and, but after just kind of biding my time and kind of seeing how things were evolve, and I hate the word evolving, but how things were moving, in the church, kind of said, hey, let's start fixing up some of these beautiful, and if you want to say antiques, I wouldn't say they weren't relics, but they were certainly our heirloom pieces that we had in our church, whether they were chalices or the Stations of the Cross, and all sorts of things. And so let's try to fix these things instead of just throwing them out and buy something from a catalog. I mean, these things have character. They have a history. They have a story. People of faith bought these pews. They probably sweat. They gave up a lot of money just for these beautiful old-fashioned pews, and to throw them out would have been a sin. So anyway, we fixed everything up, and I couldn't be happier. I'm so proud of the work that everybody has done in the last 5 years that I've been here. So I couldn't be happier. I walk in and go in there and pray every day, and I'm always just delighted to see, because I had this idea that if we just did certain things to fix, because the floor needed to be fixed, that was the main thing. And if we were going to fix the floor, let's do it right. Now, I had some people that in the beginning, I was in favor. Again, I'm kind of I'm kind of a cheap guy sometimes. It's like I'm kind of like I'm not the high price spread, but I'm not the low, but I'm kind of in the middle. And so originally we were going to do a nice little contemporary new floor once we got it fixed. But I think now that I realize, actually, come to think of it, I'm just thinking of this now. If I hadn't have been challenged by a couple of lay people to say, no, we don't want just a commercial floor. We want a beautiful floor, something that's going to be unique, and we want stone. And I said, stone? This whole floor can't even hold probably what's the carpet that's on it. It's already buckling and sinking in areas. And So, I had to put everything on hold and think about it and, talk to different people and say, well, what do you think of this? And so, but last year the planets lined up or whatever, just right, and God sent us all the right artisans and workers and contractors and a guy named Tori, who's a great project manager. And I'll tell you what, we basically took the thing apart and put it back together, and man, is it beautiful. Yeah, it's stone. It's the real deal. And we had to go down in the subfloor, and we had to fix that floor. Because that was the thing. If we had done I'm just thinking now, if we had done the commercial, simple composite, linoleum stuff or vinyl, we never really would have fixed the floor. Yeah, that's the scary thing. In fact, it wouldn't have been nearly as good as what it is now, because we didn't have to tear it apart and fix it. Because the other guy, because I asked the guy that was going to originally do it, and I said, can you do stone if we decide to go? He goes, no, I can't do stone. He goes, I can do the polycarbonate vinyl, but I don't know how to do stone. No. And I went going, okay. But then we found a stonemason, and man, talk about transforming. It was great. And I'm hoping that Pope Leo will, in his inimitable way, be able to transform the church and put it back on the rails again. Because right now it's off the rails. It's like one of those big steam locomotives that came off the tracks. It's a disaster. Think of Fugitive with Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford. And that train, the big train accident, big train wreck in the kind of the beginning of the movie there, right? That's kind of the way I see the church right now. It's kind of a wreck. It can be fixed. You can put the cars back together, fix them up, put them back on the tracks, put the engines back on the tracks, and send it on down the tracks again, but it's going to take some time. And apparently, Cardinal Prevost has made it very clear that he doesn't believe in ordaining the women, because he doesn't think clericalizing women is a good thing. It's going to create more problems. God bless him. At least he sees that. For those in the alphabet community, he's probably not going to be flying any rainbow flags. Sorry, He's very clear about one man and one woman. That's what marriage is. I think that he's very concerned about the transgender people, trying to help the people. See, that's what it's all about. Is you really love people by telling them the truth. And I'll say this to people in the alphabet community: you're kind of shot yourself in the foot when you outlawed certain things, like, I guess, what is it, reparative therapy or whatever. It'd be like people outlawing AA and NA. And there are people that probably would love to, when you're actively involved in drinking and drugging, you don't want to hear about recovery. That's the last thing you want to hear about. But thanks be to God, there is AA and there is NA, and they're not shut down, they're not silenced, they're not canceled, they're not outlawed. Because I do know that there are people in the former LGBT movement, and they got out of that lifestyle, and it was because there was a way out. And if you shut it all down and you say, nope, you can't, we're not going to let you talk like that, and we're not going to let you have those kinds of programs, well, then you're only hurting people that need help. Now, again, if you want to stay in that lifestyle, that's on you. But there are people that might want to, they have a change of heart someday. They say, you know what, this isn't really for me. I think I made a mistake. Or, a lot of these people that transitioned and now they realized, oh my gosh, I made a horrible mistake. I've ruined my life. Never going to be able to have kids. Whether you're a guy or a gal, that tried to do the AC/DC thing, but yet, there's help, there's hope. Now if you're not there and you don't want that, no one's forcing you, but think about other people's for once. Maybe it's just like, I would have, when I was a drinker, because I'm an alcoholic, I'm a recovering alcoholic. And, most of the people that I hung out with were people that drank. They probably drank kind of like me, maybe not as bad as I did, but they drank, and I enjoyed being around them. But every now and then I'd find somebody that would kind of give me that little look like, what are you doing? This isn't good for you. And I would get a little bit of a resentment, I'll be honest, but I tried to be nice about it. I'd say, hey, would you like some of this scotch? It's a single malt. And no, thank you. What do you mean, no, thank you? I'm going to give you the best that I got. This is single malt, Glenfiddich, or Glenmorangie, or whatever I was drinking that I thought was all that great stuff. And they would just be very like, no, thank you. I don't drink. And I go, oh, okay, fine, more for me, But I never really, tried to say, well, you need to drink and you need to be an alcoholic like me, No, I mean, okay, I respected them enough to say, well, that's your choice, I probably wouldn't invite you back to my house for a party ever again, but hey, at least, I'm not going to try to force you. But so, and then every now and then I'd meet, maybe very rarely, a person that was in recovery when I was still drinking. I met more recovery people when I got into recovery, but when I was drinking, I didn't really meet that many people that have been in recovery. I think because they knew how I drank and they just didn't want to be around me, period. So that's probably why I didn't meet very many people that were considered in recovery when I was actively drinking. But I'm just saying that I think people that, that they're in that lifestyle, okay, God bless you. And I hope Pope Leo will have the courage and the love, the true love, to call people, to challenge people. Because his first homily was very interesting because he talked an awful lot about the fact that personal holiness is obtainable. Okay, it's not just some pie in the sky, some ideal. It's a possibility. It's a reality for those who really want to be disciples of Jesus. And he even talked about Saint Ignatius of Antioch, a great first century saint who basically forfeited his life and was fed to the lions, and died in Nero's circus. And he's trying to call us back to our apostolic traditions. He's trying to invoke the memory of the first century Christians, the early church fathers, the early councils. He had nothing but high praise for the Eastern Catholic churches that met with him, I think, yesterday. They're in their year of Jubilee. Might have already said that. And he was very, very complimentary in how he saw that they have maintained their mystery of the transcendence and their liturgies, and how all liturgies, to include ours, should radiate that type of mystery and transcendence. Thanks be to God. So we're just going to have to wait and see. I'm hoping that, again, I think the loving thing, is not to encourage people in their sinfulness, but to call them out of that, to call them into true discipleship, to call them into holiness. Holiness means wholeness of life. And I think that, if he continues, from what I've heard and seen, the church may be in good hands right now. I don't have to wake up and hear that the Pope is going to ordain aliens for Mars next week, Oh, crazy stuff, goofy stuff, it just seemed like he was pandering to the world. He wanted the world to love, the other guy wanted the world to love him. He wanted the world's applause and approval and acceptance and adulations and accolades from the world. And he kind of forgot that, no, you don't work for the world. You work for a guy named Jesus, So I'm hoping that Papa Leo will really be a true agent for change. Well, not change in the sense of, radical, communist woke stuff, but changing us back to our apostolic roots, the early church councils. I've always said for the last maybe 10 or 12, 14 years that, as important as Vatican II is in the current life of the church, the contemporary life of the church, we can't just make that the one big, huge council, and all the other councils that came before the last 2,000 years are kind of shrunk in insignificance. No, Vatican II is a council of the church, but it's not the council. It's the most recent council, yeah, but it's not the one all and be all council. So many people feel that Vatican II separated us from our traditions, the older church. You'll hear people, well, that was the old church. We don't do that. And we got rid of that at Vatican II. How many times have I heard that phrase? We got rid of that at Vatican II. Yeah, you did, but a lot of other people didn't. So anyway, that's what I hope Pope Leo will kind of challenge people. No, there's only one church. There's not an old church and a new church, but there's not an east and a west. There's just one church. And, I'm really hoping that will be his hallmark, his fidelity to the apostolic traditions, the magisterium of the church, the teachings and doctrines and dogmas of the church, because the last 30 years, unfortunately, the poor old church has taken a real beating by the secular media and now the woke war on the church and on all things religious, I guess. So, we need someone who's going to be quiet and strong and stalwart and firm and clear and focused and let your yes be yes and your no be no. No more wishy-washy, no more ambiguity, no more steeping everything in equivocation, no more seeing which way the wind blows, but just being faithful to the confession of St. Peter. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God, and that's the confession of Peter. And Jesus, of course, says, you are Peter, tu es Petrus, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will never prevail against it. We've got to believe that. Now, I've told people in the past, we never knew how close those gates were going to get to us, though. He doesn't tell us, that, oh, yeah, you're going to be fine. You're going to be behind the lines and not going to be a problem. No, those gates have been getting closer and closer and closer. Yeah, so, but that's why I like the resurrection icon from the Eastern Church, or the Orthodox Church. They show Jesus who smashed the gates of hell and broke all the chains and the locks and everything, and set the people free. So that's the power of the resurrection. And that's what Pope Leo believes in. He believes in the power of resurrection, the power for people to have their lives radically changed. You don't have to be enslaved to your passions. And that's a wonderful thing to understand that. He says that personal holiness is obtainable. It's a reality. It's something obtainable. Yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna kind of pray and hold him to his words and say, the Holy Father, this is what you said in your inaugural sermon. And Jesus is the only way to the Father. We've been told just recently in some of the documents that the Pope Francis put out there that all religions lead to God. No, that's not true. That's not true. As Catholic Christians, we don't believe that. We believe that there's only one way to the Father, and that's through Jesus, because that's what Jesus said. Jesus is not Buddha. He's not Muhammad. He's not, Charles Spurgeon or C.S. Lewis. He is the only way, the truth, and life. So, and we need to get back, and we need to hold firm to that faith and profess it with great conviction, and not be afraid or ashamed, of our faith. Because the world tries to tell us, oh, you Christians are all these bad people. Look at all the bad things you've done. Well, individuals inside the church have done horrendous things over the centuries. There's no doubt about that. But the church itself has been a great force for good. But it's not about just doing social good. It's about saving a person's eternal soul. And we kind of swapped that out. We traded eternal salvation for social justice. And unfortunately, those two just it's actually supposed to be a both and, not either or. And that's where we're at. We've chosen one side or the other, but we haven't maybe blended them together, as maybe Pope Leo XIV can do. Just like Pope Leo XIII, recognized the problems in his time, kind of one of the first quote unquote modern popes, we would say, even though that was like in the 1890s, 1880s, I guess he was a pope. So 140 some odd years ago, almost 150 years ago. But he saw the Industrial Revolution, and again, he saw communism, and the Catholic answer is we have an antidote. We have the actual authentic answer to socialism, and because socialism tries to bring about the brotherhood of man without the fatherhood of God, and unfortunately, we have people in our church today that are they want that. Even the other guy was, I think he was a communist. I mean, here's a picture. I'll put a picture up here. Somebody gave him a quote unquote hammer and sickle cross kind of a thing, and just look on the man's face. He's glowing. It's like, yeah, this is my kind of cross, So it's kind of scary, But again, a lot of this, I'm not a person that has a lot of resentments in life. I've had a few people where I've had to struggle to forgive, but I've been able to do that through the grace of God. But I really don't. I'm not somebody who collects injustices, and I don't hold grudges. And again, Jorge Bergoglio's is now resting in his tomb. May God have mercy on his soul. May he rest in peace. But let bygones be bygones, and it's a new day, new sheriff in town, right? So, dwelling on the past doesn't really help. I think a lot of people today that are outraged about all sorts of things. I've met some people that they just have so many resentments that maybe those resentments are keeping some of these people alive. But it's just sad because their lives are miserable, and because somebody did something to them and they're angry about it. Just kind of lay it on down, let it go. Cry me a river, build me a bridge, get over it type of thing. Because you can sit there and you can wallow in the resentments and the self-pity and the oh, look what these people did to me and whatever, or you can try to find positive solutions even in the midst of, if you read, I think if it's Alexander Solzhenitsyn, reading the Gulag Archipelago, that's a powerful read. It's a very distressing, disturbing read. The cruelty that those people endured, and how some of them they just were tortured to death. They were mistreated to death. They just were so, through negligence, sickness, oppressive work, beatings, psychological, all the above, personal illness, sickness, all that stuff, the cold, golly. And yet Solzhenitsyn was able to kind of figure out that he could live in the misery, or he could just be kind of a dispassionate observer of the misery. You can't take it too personal, even though it is personal in many ways. But if you let it get in underneath your skin, and you let it fester in your heart and you poison your brain, and I think the message I got was those people were the ones that died. There's the ones that just, because they had no hope. And so he kind of had this little mind game where he would just kind of see himself as an observer, and then that's how he wrote the Gulag Archipelago, because he and some other people were writing down secretly, this is what happened today, kind of like a journal thing. And then when they got out, they were able to do some collaboration and put together this wonderful work. Is sobering and as it is, but how necessary. We need to see what real socialism and communism really leads to. So anyway, but my hope is that Pope Leo I've gone on almost an hour. Okay, folks. Okay, Pipe Pals. I've gone on too long, but let me just say thanks for listening to the old Padre. I know I kind of ramble on a lot. I've been pontificating or pipetificating. So, I'll just simply say, light up your world and light up your pipe, and Habemus Papam. Got some white smoke there.